Welcome to this episode of the Medical Affairs Professional Society podcast series, Elevate, gathering the voices of medical affairs thought leaders and stakeholders to explore current trends, define best practices, and empower the medical affairs function. Opinions are those of the presenters and do not imply endorsement by their organizations. I'm your host, Garth Sundem, Communications Director at MAPS, and today we'll be speaking with Tim Hylan, Sue Currie, and Bruno LARVOL about how MSLs deliver value to KOLs and HCPs. Tim is VP, Internal Medicine Field Medical Director Group at Pfizer. Sue is VP and Head of Medical Affairs at Nektar Therapeutics. Bruno is CEO and founder of LARVOL. This podcast is made possible by LARVOL. LARVOL has been accelerating decision-making since 2004 by providing real-time, customized competitive intelligence software with data-driven analytics to the pharmaceutical, biotech, and healthcare industries. LARVOL's comprehensive KOL monitoring solution, Omni, ensures that MSLs stay ahead of the competition with in-depth updates on their KOL's activity. Omni also makes it easy for MSLs to prepare for and track engagements with their KOLs by providing access to publications, clinical trial involvement, social media posts, and upcoming conference participation. Tim, Sue, Bruno, welcome. Today we are talking about VUCA, which stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, which describes our times very well. And Bruno, let's start with your thoughts on how the value proposition has changed for MSLs based on VUCA.
And I love that term VUCA. Actually, Tim is the one, as we were preparing, who mentioned that. It sounds like some kind of god of trouble in some ways.
And
it is, yes. Well, I since I go first, I have the easy, I guess, position to make that the value proposition has not changed, essentially, in that essentially MSLs, well, I'm not an MSL, but my customers are MSLs, are still in the same position to create value for their KOLs by helping them understand and the evolving standard of care, understand, of course, the different drugs that are changing the landscape of the practice of medicine, and that's one element that has not changed. Now, the VUCA of the pandemic has changed other things, but I would argue that the objective and the value has not changed in itself.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, so Sue, what do you think? I mean, has VUCA changed the MSL value proposition, or just the way that we deliver that value?
You know, I'm going to challenge and be contrary to what Bruno was saying. I think it has. And I think the value proposition, in fact, has increased for MSLs. So the format and the process of the value has changed. But in fact, what I'm seeing now, and as COVID has gone on longer, the changing dynamics of even healthcare providers and their interaction with their patients has been reduced. So what does that mean? That, and also then even other stakeholders within their group, so other allied health professionals or study teams. So I think in a way it's actually expanded or increased the value to complement the prior more face-to-face interactions, even with healthcare providers and institutions. I'd love to know, Tim, what your thoughts are. So to me, the value is increased, and in a way, the format and the modality or the vehicle has changed as well. So Tim, what are your thoughts?
Thanks, Sue. Yeah, I'm picking up on that theme around the modalities. I see the speed and actually digitization of content and information are two trends that are really accelerating the importance actually of what we do and how we communicate. I mean, you can think about, in today's world, it actually takes you longer to even set up a WebEx or a Zoom meeting than it does to send content around the world. And so it really challenges us that are interacting with medical customers each and every day to figure out how we can engage with them and in what modalities, as you said, and also to figure out what is that compelling need and that mutual opportunity and connection that we can still maintain. So also given the complexity of medicines, the inordinate amount of data at times that it seems that we're all trying to sift through, the need for that engagement to provide both content and the context of that information is certainly very, very important, remains so.
Interesting. So the context, okay. So is it just that MSL, the value is increased, but it's the same value that MSLs have been providing all along? Or are there opportunities in this new landscape for MSLs to provide a new kind of value? If anyone has perspective on that.
Yeah, I'll jump in first, and then I'd love to hear from Bruno and Tim. I think it has increased the value and increased the opportunities. And why I'm thinking about that is think of the from a patient-centric perspective, less interactions and touch points with their healthcare providers. And I think that's going to continue. So even if it's telehealth or touch points virtually, so they're maybe not getting those indirect educational benefits or resources or touch points. So from my perspective, I think for MSLs providing additional education, maybe further interactions or opportunities with for patient engagement or other kind of alliances or patient alliance groups may potentially increase. I don't know, Tim, what are your thoughts about that?
Yes, what I've noticed, Sue, to follow on with that, is that the diversification or the need to diversify who we engage with has certainly been evolving. You know, we would traditionally be interacting with a certain or small segment of physicians, but again, what I call the democratization of content and information is increasingly moving us to really be more attuned to where these conversations are happening, where people's eyeballs are, for example, in social media or in other ways. You know, congresses nowadays are at least right now, are virtual. We have to sort of rethink how we engage and who we engage with in these settings. And so it's really pushing us to diversify the kinds of medical customers that we engage in ways that we haven't before. Bruno, your thoughts?
I agree, and I'm glad you mentioned Congress and conferences, because of course that's a big difference for the subset of KOLs that are the most influential that go to conferences, and now they attend them virtually, and the conversation that they have among themselves and also with the industry is now different because it's virtual. So that's a new situation, a new opportunity, and a big difference. And one of the questions is how much of that will continue post-pandemic, and how do we adjust to all of that moving forward?
Well, okay.
I think we're all used to, you know, having traditional ways that we interact with our medical customers, our healthcare practitioners, and certainly over the last 8, 9, 10 months, that's been, you know, disrupted. And so we're having to rethink how we engage with them in ways that can still we can still interact with them appropriately, but also respecting the fact that their time is very limited, our time is limited, and we have to really rethink those types of engagements. So I know for the work that I do, it's really pushing us to think about how can we provide the most accurate, up-to-date information in the shortest amount of time from a very credible source. And the MSL is that credible source. And so trying to understand the information needs and how people consume information, which is very different now than it's been in recent times, it really pushes us. I mean, you have to really be prepared, I think, to be able to speak and get your point across in 1 minute, 5 minutes or 30 minutes, depending on what the customer time ability is.
Yeah. And if I could add to that, it's not just the speed and time that you have with the healthcare provider, or as you said, like the client or our stakeholders, it's actually the time for us to digest it and get it out. So in this virtual environment, you know, and if we pick a Congress, you usually at least can pull things together and synthesize them by the last day of a 5-day Congress. Well, now you actually, it comes out instantly, and sometimes even prior to the Congress, that it's getting out there. So how do you become that scientific expert on that at the very same time that it's widely disseminated? And that's, I think, what I've heard also from some of the, even the top thought leaders, is just help me, because I haven't been there to experience it, and I need you to help me become an expert in it. So that, like what you had said, is this kind of broader, it's flattening the curve basically on who's experts out there. And so it has increased, I think, the number of stakeholders and folks that we also have to interact with and ensure that they have the appropriate data and knowledge for their work.
Okay, so let's transition into, so it sounds like, you know, we're reaching more people. They have less time. You know, how do MSLs plan for these interactions if they have to be so efficient? You know, are there core elements of value that every MSL should keep in mind when planning for these interactions?
Well, I think it's being, I'll start with that. I think it's being certainly first and foremost, and this is one area which I think is not changing, is being that trusted source. Being a trusted source, a partner, being seen as a peer to other healthcare professionals in the field is so important. And maintaining that credibility that you've built up over various interactions over time is so important. And MSLs can continue to be that credible source, and identifying, again, the kind of information that our HCPs need to have, are requesting, and providing it in the way they would like to do that. So I think the credibility piece is a core element of the MSL role. It's always been there, and it's even more important now with just, again, so much different types of information, and people's beliefs about that information as well gets worked in there. And so more than ever, you know, being seen as a trusted partner is important.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Tim. It's the trusted source, a really key, a pivotal source. And but something I think that has come up is the time and the rapidity, again, of synthesizing it. So the good news, I think, in this, and I don't think it's going to go back to what it was. So the new reality or the new paradigm will mean probably less travel. But what you'll be doing versus traveling is spending that time in collating or synthesizing the data faster, because you're not on a plane, train, or automobile at the time. So I think there will be that shift in time, that 5 days after Congress to have data available is probably going to be too long, or you're going to be reactive, not proactive. And it will then, who will replace that trusted source, that, and I small t trusted, because it may be something digital that isn't a trusted source or resource for our colleagues and stakeholders.
Okay, so
Tim, what are your thoughts?
Yeah.
No, absolutely. We have to, the time between when we understand the information and when it gets out is just shrunk so much. And so, I mean, you see this even in the lay press and the media. People are sort of reading the, you know, what we used to call the teletype as it's coming out. And so this information goes around the world instantaneously, and everybody's getting equal access to it. And how do you synthesize it and understand it and put it in the context of other information that you have, as well as sorting through the beliefs about that information from the information itself. And sort of there's both a normative and a positive conversation about the content going on at the same time. And it's very important that we distinguish between those two and really stick to what the content is and the information that we're objectively providing.
Okay, so our HCPs, that, you know, they're seeking to make data-driven decisions, right? And so it's the MSL's job to provide that data, you know, in large part. Bruno, what would you say about MSLs and the delivery of this data that HCPs can use in their decision making?
I like the point that both Tim and Sue made, which is the contraction of time and the challenges coming with that contraction, because and a lot of our customers face that. The American Society of Hematology is about to happen in a couple of days, or tomorrow even maybe. And you could see on Twitter, the conversation has started a while ago when the initial abstract were available. A lot of the narratives about the data is starting to form. And as soon as the data is presented, that conversation is taking place on social media. Now, it's still relatively limited. In oncology, the number of oncologists who are discussing data is still relatively small, but you can see it year after year, especially, of course, over the last 8 months, even between ESMO and ASH and ASCO earlier, you can see the trend towards more and more engagement, quicker and quicker engagement. So now, as an industry, to help the KOLs in that speed becomes challenging. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how we sort it out. I know we will as an industry, but it's certainly a bit of a, and I hate that word, but a bit of a game changer in some ways.
I mean, I thought about a lot of these Congress situations, to pick up on that point, Bruno, about how it is the Congresses are changing so quickly. It's like one day we're all in the big box store, Target, Walmart, walking around doing our traditional way of shopping. And then the next day we're all told we have to do all of our shopping online on Amazon. And so we have to immediately think about how do we engage in that space in a way that is so different than we're all used to doing, going around in a physical space. And that's, I think, the challenge in a lot, not just the Congresses, but a lot of different platforms with individuals, with organizations. And it's just overnight, literally, I guess, and figuratively, we've had to change a different way of communicating that with our customers.
And if I can build on that too, what I've also seen is it's 365 days of potential scientific data coming out. So people aren't waiting for the ASHs or in the on-call, hem-onc space. You're not waiting for ASH or ASCO. You'll pick anything because you'll potentially have as high an impact in this virtual reality of going to, a smaller meeting. If it's out there, then it may be like what you had said, Bruno, the discussion begins and the scientific engagement and discussion around these data are there. So instead of having like 5 blips in the year, like 5 big bangs, we really have now it's wide open. It's 365 days because you may not, if you've got good data, you're going to get it out because it'll have great benefits. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, Tim, but that's what I've seen is that there's like probably 24 blips in our year now versus 1 or 2 key congresses or timeframes for scientific exchange.
Yes, those conferences were those sentinel points where they were rallying people would get on a plane and go to them, and it was, I think, well structured. But now everything is 24/7, 365, as you said. So it's all instantaneous. So those conference times become a point in which there's a release or distribution or communication of information, and then there's time after that you can, continue to communicate and engage and respond, et cetera, appropriately. And we're also more people are able to get to more of these events virtually than ever before. So it really has been, I would agree with what Bruno was saying about a game changer, that it really is challenging all of us who kind of deal in the currency of information and content and communications to really think about how we can ensure that the voice and the credibility that we bring to the conversation is heard and has an appropriate place in that conversation, because we're all just kind of scrolling through our lives with our devices more than ever, and we're having to sort of cut through a lot of that to have our perspective known.
And Tim, you've made my argument that we started this conversation with, is that I think it increases the value of the MSLs because there's all this noise all of these bombardments of data, so we can help to cut through and sift through and identify, again, what's credible, maybe some pros and cons of it, and become that trusted source. So we're actually, again, I think that makes our role even more critical when so much is coming out all the time to help identify what's the quality and the integrity of the data coming out as well.
Yeah, what I have found is it has to, there's that phrase, I guess, I don't know who it was attributed to originally, around if I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter. And what I find is when we have these data sets or this new information, the challenge I find and what my group is doing is trying to figure out how can we distill this and get the salient points in those situations where you might have shorter time to communicate or engage, and still, really get to the essence. And so that type of skill, I think, is even more important than ever.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Tim.
There seemed to be a shift, perhaps, from the big conferences to a lot of small events, the 2-day symposium, the ECME, the grand rounds, the YouTube interview, the podcast, and to the point, so you made about maybe moving toward real time. When the news break, we don't wait for ASCO anymore. And so the challenge with that our customers are facing is that it's very hard. I mean, it's easy to know when ASH or ASCO is. It's very hard to know when Dr. So-and-so will be doing an ECME or a grand round or a webinar by the equivalent of Joe Rogan in their specialty. And so and sometimes it's announced like 2 weeks before. So how do you find these smaller but still important engagement opportunity to help our KOLs? So that was a little bit of a subliminal plug for what we do, Garth, by the way.
Okay. Well, so, boy, I wish we had another hour to talk about. And here's what I would like to talk about is how MSLs can dive into these digital spaces. It used to be one-on-one MSL HCP interactions were driving the entire function. And now it seems like there's room for MSLs to be interacting in new ways in these digital spaces, in smaller events, to shape the narrative around this data almost in real time. But we don't have time. So here's what
I was just getting ready to respond to that.
No, I we got to leave it there for today, guys. And so I'm going to thank you all for joining us today. Tim, Sue, and Bruno. MAPS members, continue the conversation at our community portal. Maybe we'll talk some of our thought leaders into joining us there. And don't forget to subscribe. And, we hope you enjoyed this and what I hope will be continuing episodes with this team of the Medical Affairs Professional Society podcast series, Elevate. Thank you all.